Hi, this is Andrew, and I'm going to try to explain my current understanding of how KeyForge triggers work, specifically with regard to a few interesting cards like Wild Wormhole, Library Access, Nexus, Spectral Tunneler, etc. I'm going to start by explaining a little bit about, well, I guess this is like computer science, and then how Magic's stack works, which isn't relevant to KeyForge, except that I think a lot of people get confused that they don't work the same. So I want to cover it for that reason. So let me just start off with an explanation of queues. So a queue is a container where we're going to place work to be done, and then we hope that there's something on the other end that's going to do work. So for example, in distributed systems, or I guess threaded systems too, we might have a queue, and we have something over here that adds work A, work B, work C, and work D. And over here on the other side, we have one or more workers, and it's for our purposes, we only have one worker in a board game, so don't worry about this too much. But you might have one worker that says, "Okay, I'm going to do work A," and then this one says, "I'm going to do work B," and then this one finishes first with B. This one's still working on A, so this one says, "Okay, I need more work to do. What am I going to do? Okay, I'll go get the next one," and it grabs C. Well, this setup would be what's called a FIFO queue. FIFO stands for first in, first out, and what that means is we added A to the queue before B, so therefore something will start working on A before it would choose to start working on B. However, this isn't the only kind of queue. We could also have a LIFO queue, which stands for last in, first out, and in a last in, first out system, we might have something add A to the queue, and then add B to the queue. And when the worker comes, it says, there's a new thing, I'm going to grab that. And so it actually grabs B before A, and it starts working on B. And then the other worker, the next worker comes around and it sees, here's A, and it might start working on A. But let's say before that happens, we get C added. Well, now the worker would come and say, I see C, I'll grab that and start working on that. And only when everything in front of A has been taken care of would A actually get processed. So that's a last in, first out queue. And there are other types of queues as well. So we might have a priority queue, and in a priority queue, we might add, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and we might have something that selects the next thing to work on using an algorithm like do vowels first. And so it comes along and it sees A and it works on A, and then next it'll go ahead and grab E, and only after A and E are done will it ever get around to B, because it's saying, vowels have higher priority. So this would be an example of a priority queue, where we treat things differently based on their characteristics. All right, now, let's talk about the stack in Magic. The stack in Magic is a LIFO queue. It is last in, first out. So let's say that you, as a player in Magic, have 3 hit points left, and I play a sorcery that says, so you have 3 HP, that's the game state, and now I play a sorcery that says deal 5 damage. But you say, don't worry about it, I'm okay. I have a spell, an instant spell, that says do 3 healing. And you play that. And at this point, so the 5 damage would kill you, But at this point, because it's a LIFO queue, the 3 healing will be processed before the 5 damage because it was added to the stack last, meaning it would take you to 6 HP and my 5 damage would not kill you. However, let's say that instead I have another spell that says, or even let's say it does 6 healing. But now let's say I have an instant that will do 3 damage. Well, if you process these all at the same time, the result would be that you would live, because you would end up with 9 minus 8, you'd end up with 1 health. However, because they'll be processed in order, you would die and I would win, because the 3 damage would be dealt before any healing could be done. However, let's say you throw another instant on the stack that says cancel. Well, at this point, you're going to live, because, again, we're going to process them last in, first out. So the cancel will remove the 3 damage, meaning you'll take 6 healing before I do 5 damage. So this is how a LIFO queue operates. Magic stack is a LIFO queue. However, KeyForge does not use a LIFO queue. So let's take a simple example, and this has been covered many, many times and really clarified by FFG. We're confident in this. Let's say that there is on the board an autocannon, which says, let's say there's an autocannon, there is a hunting witch, and I have a hunting witch, and I also play an urchin. Well, there are 3 triggers that all happen simultaneously, because each time or after and play all happen at the same time. An effect that says play happens after the card is played. Something that says each time is also after, and something that says whenever, I think that's the other phrasing, is also after. So in this case, 3 things are going to happen, and I get to choose in which order they'll happen. The autocannon is going to do 1 damage to the urchin, the hunting witch is going to gain me an amber, and the urchin is going to steal 1. And I, as the active player, get to choose in what order I will do these things. So I can choose, and actually, you know what, let's do, instead of hunting witch, let's say it's a Taliga that my opponent has. That actually makes this more interesting. So let's say my opponent has an autocannon, a Taliga, I play an urchin. They have no amber. They have 0 amber. Well, I can choose in what order to trigger these things. And I could choose to do autocannon first, and then Taliga, and then actually the urchin effect will be gone. So if I chose to do it that way, then my urchin would be killed, my opponent would gain an amber, and the steal effect will be gone. It would be off the board, so it wouldn't trigger. However, the most optimal way I could, as a player, resolve this is to choose to do Taliga first, urchin second, and autocannon third. This causes my opponent to go up to 1 amber, me to be able to steal an amber, and lastly, the urchin dies. That's the most optimal for me in most cases. And this is why I'll say this is a priority queue system. All these things are actually added into the queue at the same time because they share the same timing point, but I, as the active player, get to choose in which order to resolve them. That's a priority queue. And there's another interesting thing about this, which is because of the way things work, if the urchin was killed first, let's say I did autocannon before urchin, then actually by the time we get around to 2, the urchin is gone, it doesn't get resolved. So this really does fit the queue mentality, where the game state says a creature was played, there are 3 effects that need to be resolved, but if the next time it comes around and checks, we resolve 1, we go back and check, and now there's only 1 to be resolved because the urchin is off the board, then we just resolve that last one. We can't resolve the one that's gone. So the game state can actually have, things that would have been resolved end up not resolved. And here's an interesting example, and this is clarified in the FAQ. If I have a nexus, says reap, use an opponent's artifact, and I reap with the nexus, then the game state says, did you reap with, what did the nexus reap? Okay, well, I'm going to trigger after reap effects for the nexus. And we say, okay, well, after reap, use, so the game trigger point is after reap, and it says, aha, there is one here. It's the only one. We'll resolve that. And let's say that my opponent has a spectral tunneler. When I use the spectral tunneler, it says to choose a creature, and that creature is flank for the rest of the turn, and also has the text, gains the ability reap, draw a card. So now Nexus has reap, draw a card. So we've effect 1, and the game state says, okay, we're still in after reap. Are there any more after reap effects that need to be resolved? And the answer is yes, there now is one. And so we have to, we actually don't even have a choice. We have to resolve that now. And so you would get to draw a card. This has been answered in an FAQ. So from this FAQ, we actually know that for sure that the game state will check again for new effects, even that have been added since we got to this trigger point. Okay, just another example of this is a lot of people this will be triggering for, but to go back to the example of Archimedes, the initial ruling on Archimedes is that if you have an Archimedes and it has and there are neighbors, we'll call them 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there's a board wipe effect. The initial ruling from FFG was that this creature goes to archives, this creature goes to archives, and at that point, well, it's not even necessarily in that order. Creature 1 goes to archives, and at that point, creature 1 is no longer there, and so now, so it has destroyed archive, destroyed archive, but when it goes to the archives, then creature 3 moves over and gains destroyed archive. And now we get to choose between archiving one of these or the other. Let's say we choose 2. Then creature 4 moves over and gains destroyed archive. But they've since clarified, or not clarified this, but they actually changed it in rules version 1.4, because they added a rule that says that once a creature has been tagged for destruction, once we know this creature is going to be destroyed, it can't gain any new effects. And so now it goes over, becomes a neighbor of Archimedes, but because it's already marked for destruction, it can't gain that archive itself ability, and so it doesn't, and it actually goes to the discard pile. So that was a change in the rules. Okay, now let's consider how things work if we first play library access and then we play wild wormhole. And let's imagine that the wild wormhole is going to get us, we don't know this yet, but it's going to get us a lab work. Well, when we play the wild wormhole, the wild wormhole first gains us an amber. Then, actually 2 effects go on the stack at the same time. The first is play well, I'm calling it the first, but it actually doesn't matter. So we'll say A is play play the top card of your deck, and B is draw a card. That's from the library access. So both the play effect from Wild Wormhole and the each time you play a card effect from library access go into the queue at the same time. They become available to be resolved. And so the game state says to the active player, hey, you pick which of these to do. Now, if they choose to draw first, then you'll draw, and then you will afterwards, so you could say we'll do draw first, and then afterwards we'll do this play the top ability. Let's imagine though that we choose to do the play the top card ability first. Well, at that moment, so let's say the first thing you do is play library access, second thing is play Wild Wormhole, the third thing rather that you do is gain an amber, the fourth thing that you do is play the top card of your deck. Well, when that happens, it turns out that it is lab work. So, the fifth thing that you do is gain an amber. You don't have any choice about that because that happens right away when you play the card. But now there are two more things that go on the stack. Or not on the stack, because it's not a stack, but two more things that have to be resolved. Because you just played a card, you just played lab work. So C is archive a card, and D is the effect from LA, from library access, which is draw a card. And at this point, you as the active player, you can decide, I want to draw first or I want to archive first. However, you cannot at this point choose to draw two cards first. You can't do D, B, C, because you right now are at the trigger from playing lab work, not at the trigger from playing Wild Wormhole. You're at the trigger from playing lab work. So you can choose to draw the one card from lab work first and then do the archive from lab work, and then you finally come back around and do the draw from library access from playing Wild Wormhole. But you can't go back to the left on this chart until you've done all the things to the right on the chart. Now, had you chosen to do the draw from the Wild Wormhole library access first, and then do the Wild Wormhole play effect, at that point, you would have, you could have drawn two cards total before you decide what to archive. And by the way, in 99% of the time, it makes sense to choose the draw first. Because you just always, even if it's like you played Twin Bolt Emission, you're better off having that one extra card in your hand, slightly more information, before you choose what to do 2 damage to. Who knows, you might draw something that makes you change your mind. So I almost always am going to choose to do the draw from the library access before I resolve the play effect from the card I just played. 99% of the time. Okay, so this is an idea. I haven't heard anybody else call this, but I'm calling it nested resolution. We have a nested resolution. We have to resolve everything to the right on this chart before we can come back over to the left. Okay, so now finally we get to this question that was just posted today, which is, what if I play Wild Wormhole first, and the Wild Wormhole effect, so that the second thing I do is gain an amber, and then I'm going to do this play effect, which has me play the top card of my deck. So this is at the trigger point of This is at the trigger point of after I play Wild Wormhole. Well, when I do this, this plays a library access, and the library access has one play effect. We'll call it C, which is for the rest, blah 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 blah. For the rest of the turn, anytime you play a card, draw a card. So the game resolves this, and now there's this game state effect or ability, which is after a card is played, draw a card. Well, we come back over here and the game says, okay, is there anything left to resolve from having played Wild Wormhole? And the answer now becomes yes. There is a draw effect from the library access that has to be resolved. And so we do this next. Again, this is the same idea. Basically, after Wild Wormhole happens and there's a play top card, and then as a result of that we end up adding draw, and this works actually the same as the Nexus situation where we have after reap we have use, and then that leads to a situation where we have another effect, which is draw. So again, the thing that this hinges on is that we don't leave this timing trigger point until after there's nothing left to resolve for it. Works the same for Nexus as for Wild Wormhole and library access. This is very different from Magic, but I saw somebody use the word intuitive, and I think you have to be really careful with that. Usually intuitive just means what you're used to, and I don't actually think this is I don't think this is particularly crazy or impossible to grasp or anything like that. I think most people can understand this. It's just not quite what you're used to. And I don't want KeyForge to actually be the same game as Magic, so I'm pretty okay with it. But if this is a little confusing for you, I totally understand. But please stick around and keep trying, because I think after iterations of these types of questions, we're going to all be less confused by this. It'll feel more intuitive to operate in the rules this way. So thanks for listening. I hope this helped somebody. There's still a chance in my mind that I have something wrong here, and in that case I would be happy to learn that. So if you want to point out something specific you think I got wrong, I'm happy to hear it out. Certainly if FFG comes out and says, hey Andrew, you were wrong, I'm very happy to hear that out. But this is my current understanding of how things work. So thanks, I hope it helps, and get out there and forge those keys.